Hi guys, today we'll be talking about Hertel's criteria and its role as a predictor in avascular necrosis of the humeral head. First off, we'll start off with the blood supply of the humeral head. As you know, the third part of the axillary artery gives rise to two branches, the anterior circumflex humeral artery or the ACHA and the posterior circumflex humeral artery, PCHA. So, for a long time, it was thought that the anterior circumflex humeral artery and its anterolateral branch, the arcuate artery, were the primary blood supply for the humeral head. However, research over the years has shown us that the posterior circumflex humeral artery is the major blood supply to majority of the humeral head, providing about 64% of the blood supply. The arcuate artery runs around the region of the biceps tendon and mainly supplies the GT and also parts of the humeral head. So, what is Hertel's criteria? This is a screenshot directly from the original article by Hertel, which was published in 2004. So, as you can see here, he has a bunch of criteria and basic fracture types which tell us the chance of AVN and how we can predict the chance of AVN using these criteria. So, you can see here 4-part fractures and anatomic neck fractures have 74 and 71% positive predictive value for AVN. Short calcar segment, disrupted medial hinge, and these two are just like Neer's classification, where there needs to be a 45-degree displacement between segments and also 45 degree of angulation between segments and greater than 1 centimeter displacement, especially of the tuberosities greater than 10 mm, glenohumeral dislocation and head splitting. All uh, are positive for avascular necrosis, and of course combined criteria. So he says that the anatomic neck fracture with a calcar segment less than 8 mm and a disrupted hinge has a 97% positive predictive value for AVN. So to summarize it, less than 8 mm calcar length attached to the articular segment or the metaphyseal extension of the humeral head. What I mean by this, I'll show in the diagram. So you can see, suppose this is the fracture line at the level of the surgical neck. So if there's a part of the metaphysis which remains attached to the head and the length of this attachment of the metaphysis to the head is greater than 8 mm, he says that the blood supply of the humeral head is preserved. Whereas, as you can see, in this situation where there's no metaphyseal hinge at all, here there is more chance of AVN. So that's point number 1. I will show you with X-rays also. Point 2 is disrupted medial hinge or medial shaft displacement greater than 2 mm. What he means by that is, you can see here there's no displacement of the medial, there's no medial displacement of the shaft. Here you can see there is medial displacement of the shaft, or the medial hinge is not maintained. You can see the medial hinge is maintained. Here the medial hinge is disrupted. Don't worry, I'll show you with X-rays also how all this is supposed to look. So here you can see there's a fracture of the surgical neck of the humerus and maybe even an undisplaced fracture of the GT. You can see here there's a nice hinge medially, which is probably greater than 8 mm, and there is no medial displacement of the shaft. So there's less chance of AVN in this kind of fracture. Here you can see there's no medial hinge at all. So there's just a surgical neck fracture. There's no part of the metaphysis which is still remaining attached to the head. And also but there's no medial displacement of the shaft. So there's less chance of AVN here also, but even lesser in this X-ray. Coming to this X-ray, here you can definitely see there's no medial hinge. It's a little difficult to see. And also there's a large displacement of greater than 2 mm of the shaft of the humerus medially. So why this could be is because, as you know, the blood supply comes from the medial aspect, where the axillary artery gives the ACHA and the PCHA from this region. So medial displacement of the shaft is more likely to damage the blood supply of the humeral head. So logically that does make sense to some extent. Then other important things were anatomic neck fracture. This is an undisplaced anatomic neck fracture. I couldn't find a displaced X-ray. So this is one of the criteria. But that makes sense why an anatomic neck fracture could lead to AVN, because you can see the blood supply comes from a retrograde fashion from here to above. So if this is fractured, even though there'll be some rotator cuff branches coming here and supplying this region, if this is clean, fractured and displaced, it can go into AVN. Head split fractures in this, like you can see coronal splitting of the head, and even fracture dislocation. You can see a part of the humeral head is dislocated anteriorly. Excuse me. All these are important predictive factors as per Hertel's criteria. So you can see here an anatomic neck fracture with a calcar segment less than 8 mm and with the disrupted hinge also has the highest predictive value for AVN. Alright, that will be it for Hertel's criteria. Thank you.